Well, grand rising, and welcome to Yolanda Monet's Motivational Moment. Before I start, I must do my salutations. Abaragani. Assalamu alaikum. Ikadro. Now that I've done my salutations, let's get into the meat of the message for today. As you know, we're going to talk about explorations and early colonization. And this topic is kind of really dear to my heart because the difference between a person who came here looking for freedom and justice is different than a person who was stolen from their country and placed in a servitude status or placed in a society that thought that they were lower than, that they were three-fourths of a human. So immigrants for me is different than being stolen and brought to America. So, the European exploration kicked off a global transformation. The Portuguese and the Spanish expeditions led to the charge with new technology in embodying the long sea voyages. Columbus of 1914 trip to the Caribbean sparked a rush to explore and conquer the Americas. The Columbian Exchange reshaped both hemispheres. Crops, animals, and disease moved over the old and the new worlds, altering diets and populations. Europeans' power established colonies, setting up trade networks and labor systems that would shape the Antarctic world for centuries. Now we're going to talk about the age of discovery and key explorers. The age of discovery began in the 15th century, led by the Portuguese and the Spanish explorers. Technological advances enabled long-distance sea voyages by improving their ships and navigation tools. Christopher Columbus sailed west in 1492, seeking a route to Asia for Spain. From Asia to Spain. Columbus reached the Caribbean islands, believing he had found a new route to India. He didn't even know where he was going. He ended up in the Caribbean. Subsequent voyages by Columbus explored more of the Caribbean and Central America. Other explorers followed, including Amerigo Vespucci, who recognized the land as a new world. Vasco da Gama successfully reached India by sailing around Africa in 1498. Now, the quest and explorations of the Americas. Spanish conquistadors led military expeditions to explore and conquer the Americas. Herman Cornelius conquered the Arctic Empire in Mexico between 1519 and 1521. Francisco Perez conquered the Inca Empire in Peru between 1532 and 1572. Explorers claimed land for their respective European monarchies. Indigenous populations felt devastating consequences from the European contact, disease, enslavement, and warfare. Early trade and colonization, Caribbean exchange and global impact. Caribbean exchange referred to the worldwide spread of plants, animals, cultures, technologies, and disease between the old and the new worlds. New world crop introduced to Europe and Africa includes potatoes, maize, tomatoes, and tobacco. Old world crops and livestock brought to the Americas include wheat, rice, horses, and cattle. European disease devastated Native American populations who lacked immunity, smallpox, and the measles. Exchange formatted cultural diets and populations on both sides of the Atlantic. European colony expansion and economic systems. The Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 divided the New World between Spain and Portugal. Other European powers like England, France, Netherlands later established their own colonies. The triangle trade developed, connecting Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Ships that carry manufactured goods from Europe to Africa, enslaved people from Africa to the Americas, and raw materials from the Americas to Europe. Mercantilism emerged as a dominant economic theory, guided colony policies. European nations sought to maximize exports and minimize imports to accumulate more wealth and power. Colonies were established to provide raw materials and to serve as markets for finished goods. Now, the labor system and social structures. The economic system in Spain colonies granted control over indigenous labor. Native Americans were forced to work in mines and on plantations. Systems led to worldwide abuse and exploitation of the indigenous population. Decline of the native population due to disease and harsh conditions led to increased resilience of enslaved African labor. Plantations, economic development in the Caribbean and parts of the mainland Americas. Rigid social hierarchies emerged in colony social based on race and place of birth. Now, that was just a little tidbit about the European exploration and early colonization and how they came about getting slaves and or workers for their fields. They tried to minimize the import, maximizing the export, meaning the more you bring in, the more we can use to satisfy our needs. And the less that we have to get from you is even better. We're able to control, manipulate, and or use what we need to use in order to get what we need to get. Okay, now the African-American history before 1864, the Middle Passage and Africa arrives in the Americas. The Middle Passage marched as a chapter in history, a brutal track in history, forcible transportations of millions of Africans to the Americas. This inhumane trade lasted over 400 years, was driven by Europeans' demand for labor in colonies, and justified by racist ideologies. Conditions on slave ships were horrific, which capitalized, endured overcrowding, disease, and abuse. Despite this, many Africans resisted maintained their cultural traditions. The Middle Passage shaped African Americans' identity and culture. So tomorrow we're going to talk about the historical content of the Middle Passage. So with that being said, guys, I have got to go. I love you, but God loves you more. And remember, I'll see you at the top because the bottom, way too crowded. Peace.